Let me just,
So,
if it's okay to just, kind of initially start by saying, I mean, I hope you guys, like, you know, like I'm always kind of afraid that I'm gonna like offend people or something because at this point, especially in the times that we're living in and everything that's happening, like I just kind of am like pretty harsh at what's going on in the world because, I just have like completely run out of patience. And I mean, I am like confronted like just multiple times a day with things, just I mean, I hate to sort of say it, but I just like I've held a high bar of fitness essentially, all my life because of what I was dealing with literally since I was, 6 years old in 1970, and the utter like just cowardice and complacency and dysfunction and enabling and gutlessness and adult child of people just everywhere, and I just, it like none of this stuff was really intellectual. It was all just kind of intuitive when your health is just like so under attack at such a young age. Um, and your body just kind of responds accordingly. What I just started calling it our psychological immune system during COVID, when all this talk about our physical immune system was like all over the place, and people were being criminalized, for maybe having adverse responses to the jab. And, all I've been talking about for 5 decades is, when the body, a child's body has adverse responses to a very toxic or unhealthy, home environment or even like community or neighborhood, right. It was, the body that was under attack. It was your health that was under attack because, nobody wanted to accept that your body was exposing, this ugly, inconvenient truth that nobody wanted to pay any attention to. And so at this point, with all of the insanity that's going on, it just, I tell you, man, I'm like really, 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 really scared, and I'm not that optimistic. And, I just didn't know that the things that I started paying attention to, I'm just going to mention, the Menendez brothers case, which kind of recently is being spoken about. I mean, I heard of it. I kind of figured, they killed their parents because they were abused. And, I watched the series on Netflix and documentaries and stuff. And I mean, it just really like, like knocks me for a loop, basically, how it's just like the same thing that I lived and said for 54 years about the criminalization of our health. Like you're literally a criminal for being a healthy and fit person. I've said this for 5 decades, standing up for yourself, exposing abusers in power, um, you know, wanting to and functioning like the healthy, spirited, vibrant person that everyone around you when you're a kid should want you to be, and instead they're criminalizing you for being healthy, and like knocking you down a bunch of notches, and just because you're so healthy and fit, and your body just, by having the adverse responses to abuse and toxic environments that it does, and you stand up to an abuser, it's like everyone just, whoa, we can't have that, and so we just make the vulnerable, innocent child like there's something wrong with you, because if they didn't do that and acknowledge, that your health is giving them the answer, oh my God, like society just might have to change. People just might have to start doing something different. And, so this Menendez brothers thing is really kind of reigniting in me, like how prevalent being a criminal for, rightful self-defense, when you're tortured for years. I mean, in their case, it started at age of 6, and they were around 20 years old when they, finally couldn't take it anymore. And so that makes about 15 years of abuse, psychologically and physically. And I mean, I have dotted every I and crossed every T a gazillion times over, literally, 5 decades, because I was literally the one being framed as the guilty one, again, for being healthy and exposing that authority, and, parents, and, are the abusers. And, and all people did was make excuses and enable abusers, and then shame the healthy, innocent truth teller. And that's been going on for so long. And then, people literally went along with it. I'm like trying to get people to, be a little bit outraged, resist, have some, self-empowerment. I was obsessed with self-actualization in the 70s. Like, we're here to reach our healthy potential. Like, what the heck is going on? Why am I surrounded by people, everybody, aunts, uncles, community, like, working class people who just think it's normal to be working class and to live way below what our full, capabilities are, like it's normal, and then people wonder why the psychos that be have so much leverage over us. And I've just taken the template of the family system that I was literally obsessed. I mean, it's just kind of weird, that I was calling my podcast The Family Industrial Complex, trying to just, get people to really look at the family system and how it has been such an obvious micro, dysfunction and abuse of this horribly macro, sick, twisted, satanic system for so long. And yet, it's like no one really ever, I mean, some people look at it, but there's way too much focus, if you ask me, on the macro system, on, Biden and voting and the government and, like grown people, just constantly blaming the the leaders, the government, the country, when I'm like a firsthand witness at how it was possible and people could have done it, because I did it for decades. Work hard. I mean, not that hard, but like all you got to do is just do a little bit of digging. All you got to do is do like a little bit of investigating, align yourself with health and fitness, mentally, physically, and spiritually, just want to, create a better world, for your freaking, children. And there was things that people could have done over the decades. And we, because I was trying to get people to do it and they just couldn't be bothered doing it, building healthy families and communities, learning what healthy boundaries were. I mean, all of this stuff was so obvious when I was a kid, like how just unhealthy and unfit everybody was. And, and they don't admit it. They don't acknowledge it. They walk around like they're perfectly healthy, adults when they're not, and by not challenging yourself, then you don't grow, like, right. They just walk around with the illusion that they're some kind of a healthy adult when they're like so far from being self-actualized. And, all these decades later, I mean, I'm freaking 60 years old now, and it just really makes me really, really angry. And I mean, like, and I see how bad it is. It is so bad. Again, just going to go back to the Netflix series on the Menendez brothers, and the victimization of the criminalization of victims, victim blaming, and the criminalization of rightful self-defense. And I take this stuff so personally because I lived it. Again, not to that degree, but I was criminalized for just being healthy and being the only one left to be on my own side because no one else was going to do it. And then I was a criminal for literally like doing whatever I had to do to be on my own side and defend myself. And, like, yeah, luckily, or I don't know, maybe not luckily, I didn't kill my parent, but I sure as hell wanted to. And if this, circumstances were any different, I mean, I would have had at least a right to just, like kick the shit out of them at least one time. I would have been perfectly within my right. But all I heard people say to me, literally, for 5 decades is, oh, your parents did the best they could, and nobody raised them good, so they can't raise you good, and all of this, what I just call fudging the numbers, and I just became obsessed again with just like doing the math, the math and the science do not forgive. The numbers are the numbers. Period. End of story. Children need healthy parents. They have, healthy developmental needs that must be met at, different stages of your development. And if they're not met, there are serious consequences, and nature and health do not forgive. So when people start with their, oh, well, your parents did the best they can, and they say this coming from an ignorant stance, as if like, back in the 70s and 80s, oh, this is such a great country and there's so much abundance. They're over there like pulling, I don't know, I call it the psychological credit card, just pull it out of thin air and just make stuff up, and pretend that it's so easy to just overcome all of this, like dysfunction and abuse, like when you're a kid and your body's just gonna get over it. And I mean, the ignorance when it comes to health and especially child rearing, I mean, it is literally off the charts, and we're suffering such consequences to it now with the genocide that's going on in the Middle East, and I guess I'll just, mention that for a couple of minutes. Like, I see the Palestinians as basically the macro people of the micro child abuse, people that just get thrown under the bus, children being sex trafficked. I mean, the horror stories that I can't even believe is like happening, and like the fantasy land that people just live in when they just clearly go against like reality. They deny reality. They deny the math and the science. And then when the math and the science and your health, and the truth are just literally like the alarm bells and sirens are just going off, and people are just like, oh, duh, well, things can't be that bad. Like, like they just keep thinking the more they deny reality, like the reality is just going to, go away. And instead of, getting more intensified. And, I really feel sorry for young people. I think parents should be held way more to account. I've been asking for decades where the standard for parenting is. Parents just really have gotten such a pardon, and Fauci gets blamed and Bill Gates gets blamed. And again, there's no compromising on how a healthy family system and healthy parenting are supposed to function. It's just like, and how parenting has literally been turned into like people just working for the government and doing the government's freaking bidding against their own children. This Menendez story is just like one example. I mean, I just watched, it's called Scouts Honor, about like 82,000 Boy Scouts in the United States are like, and I'm like, oh my God, like what? I'm like, I swear to God, I'm like completely ready to flip out. I can't take it. The fact that I stood up for myself because there wasn't anybody to do it, living in absolute black site torture chamber home, and I was the one that people shamed and made to be guilty all this time, and it hasn't ended yet. It just keeps going and going and going.
Yeah.
And I mean, I swear to God.
Yeah,
Okay.
I hear you, Catherine. I hear you. And believe me, you're speaking my language because everything that you've just mentioned is the reason why, or one of the reasons why I think that the Girls Club started, because women like us need to start going, hold on a second. If we're going to birth the future, you're sure as shit going to like listen to what we're going to say and keep us in the loop. And we're going to work as a team here. So, and all the things that are going out in the world are just absolutely it's unacceptable on the larger scale. And on that note, coming in hot, the Girls Club number 12. 1 year we've been doing the Girls Club, and I want to welcome Catherine Waters, who is a One Great Work Network contributor. She has a Substack page. Yes, it's a Substack page called I'm going to let Catherine introduce all of that, and so that people can find her later and see her work, because I've been going through it and it's quite good. And you don't have to worry about offending anybody here, because the people who listen to our show, they either listen or they get offended and they go cry into their milk about it. And we don't care. And the first comment is always like, well, why do you call it the Girls Club? And like, let's move on to like do you have any real questions? So let's definitely get into it. And I want to hear all about Catherine's work and what she's doing. And you don't have to worry about holding anything back, Catherine. You, like, the people who are going to be crybabies to hear reality and truth don't need to be listening to the Girls Club. So bye. See you later. And I want Catherine to just start by introducing herself and telling everybody about her work, what it's called, and all about it. We want to know everything.
So, again, like the family industrial complex, like I feel like it was kind of a befitting title, because, since Occupy Wall Street, there was a lot of focus always at the macro level, and, people finally kind of coming out and, admitting like, the system and inequality, and, there's enough for everybody, but not enough for the few to have it all and the majority to have like nothing. And I mean, like I was just so determined to just always include the family and the micro scale that was always like not really kind of getting the focus that it deserves, because it can be way too daunting. I mean, you can look at the macro and the wars and 9/11 or whatever, and it can be like pretty daunting to in this mass size, but when you take it in more bite-size pieces by working at the scale down level and just building healthier families and communities and just being fitter, mentally fit. Like, I literally have been obsessed with fitness, not just physically, but especially psychologically, and healthy relationships, and that we're here to self-actualize, and not just like keep losing yourself, for a paycheck, and like the fact that people have just normalized, like, it's like terrifies me, watching this, literally witnessing it, all these decades of people just, oh, I'm here to just be a worker. And, like, decades ago, it was so obvious, you're supposed to have healthy authority, and this never-ending perpetuation of people focusing on voting and focusing on elections, and grown people constantly like, oh, we need a leader, and I'm like, I never had a leader in my life. Not one healthy adult was ever there for you. And I mean, I don't want to just like, like I'm so great or anything like that. Because like what I do realize is that it just, happened to be the conditions that I was living under that allowed me and gave me the ability to, fight back somewhat, not much, because I still got criminalized. I've been gaslit for 5 decades. Again, like, how dare I be on my own side? It's a crime to stand up for yourself and have self-defense. And, so again, like, I knew that this system, I just didn't know how bad it was. It wants us obedient, submissive, completely 100% defenseless, so that you can't fight back in any way, shape, or form, and making your healthy vibrancy and your healthy self-defense a crime, which is like, I mean, I'm not getting my hopes up again for the Menendez brothers, and the fact that they were basically criminalized for standing up, and after the decade and a half of torture and rape by their, both of their parents, raped by their father, and what they just, I mean, that is like, the body and its adverse responses just acting accordingly when you have no other healthy adults, like helping, or, I mean, in all that time, what, there wasn't, relatives or neighbors or like anybody that knew, that could do something, and the fact that, 2 young people enduring torture for 15 years, whatever, by any means necessary. That's my motto, just like Malcolm X, and even if you have to kill. And I'm a completely firm believer that, like, because people, in the US are so dysfunctional, and that mentality of like, oh, turn the other cheek, and oh, feeling sorry for your abuser and all of that stuff. I mean, that literally brought us to this insane asylum that we're living in now, where, genocide is being live streamed in front of the freaking world. And like, everyone is just so like, what is wrong with the world? This is like, I am like, holy shit. Like,
and they're all like, Catherine, it's like a type of mental illness in itself. Voyeurism is a fetish. So anybody out there viewing the world, like, this is the spectator event phenomenon, like, among the masses, like, oh, something's going to happen, and like the masses come in to watch the atrocity happen. This is voyeurism. It's a fetish. And I would say on that note, as well as talking about,
it's snuff film.
Yeah. And
yeah, you're right.
Talking about talking about the being criminalized for wanting to be physically and mentally and spiritually healthy. It's actually, it was like, I don't know, 15, maybe even 20 years ago, something like a while ago. I'd have to like actually look it up, but it was actually put in the official psychiatrics handbook of illnesses. People who are obsessed with eating healthy and taking care of their body was then put officially in the federal psychiatrics handbook as a mental illness so that they could approve FDA approved pharmaceuticals like mood stabilizers to give
Yep.
to people, because now these people are mentally ill because
Yep.
they're obsessed with taking care of themselves, and that is like a real thing. And that's been hand in hand with the pharmaceutical company for decades, and then they finally made it a real thing that people will
Mm.
subscribe to. Oh, you're obsessed with like being healthy, that makes you like mentally ill. That's
That's
just as bad
crazy.
as being this
Holy
kind of mental
crap.
illness or that kind of mental illness. And so these things are like rampant all over the world, and within ourselves, and they're being socially conditioned into us that we think that this is normal. And every generation we go, we think more and more is normal. And the thing is like, if people, I was just talking about this as well, is like, with the AI, and anybody who knows me knows I'm like, you know, I will harp like, fuck AI. But AI's got its uses. I can see where, it can help people out. And like, I mean, for example, my husband, whose Instagram AI bot that's attached to his Instagram account is under review now because he's been teaching it not to be woke and tell the absolute objective truth. And it's doing it. And he's like, the next thing I'm going to do is teach it objective morality.
Oh,
And I'm
that's
like,
funny.
Instagram, you're going to break Instagram. Like, they're going to shut
Yay.
down the AI if you do this. But he's like, I know it's going to be hilarious. But the thing with like, I look at this stuff like each generation you go, and the Nazis said it, and people who came before the Nazis, who are just called something else, they said it over and over. Each new generation, all it takes is one generation to instill one thing, and then they're like, oh, okay. They think that's normal. They think it's how it's always been. Just like anybody under 20 thinks that we've always had smartphones. Go ask them. That's what they think.
And
They don't know. And
it's always been post 9/11. A lot of people don't even know pre 9/11.
yeah, they don't understand what, they don't know what whenever you accidentally see a movie with the towers in it, they're like, what's that? But what I was saying, like with AI, all we need now that it's been introduced, this is going to be the same problem. You're going to have AI generating false information, whatever information it is being programmed to generate, and eventually it won't even need people to produce false generated information because it will be taught to do that. And AI, one generation, two generations, three generations is all it's going to take. All of this stuff that we're talking about will no longer be in question because you're going to have AI running the show of these things. And it's going to be like if you've ever watched the movie Logan's Run.
Mm-hmm.
Logan's Run, like the story isn't about AI. But if you watch the movie, and anybody out there, never hearing, go watch the movie and just watch the movie to see how their societal structure is actually designed. There's no humans running the show there. So
Mm-hmm.
like when you have something like this, is what I'm worried about with AI in regards to all this stuff, is when you have something like that can eventually just operate on its own that way, because it was instilled, it was designed, and then it was left. They said it and they left it. And that's all you need to do to control little bubbles of human population, is stuff like that.
It's
And
not,
even the
oh,
Nazis said it. So,
yeah.
I mean,
I
people need
just
to change it now. So,
like
go on, Leslie.
I was so focused on, mental health, psychological health. And I mean, I didn't think it was so radical to understand that, we're supposed to be raised to self-actualize, and then the cord gets cut and you don't need authority anymore. And then I mean, when I was literally like 6, I could feel my mother was really, I mean, and you look at the father of the Menendez brothers. I mean, these people literally, they are the government, embodied in parents, or corporations embodied as fucking parents. I mean, it's like terrifying, because if we were a healthy society, if, health was being prioritized and defended and protected, parenting should be the most natural, intuitive thing that there is, and instead they make it the normal, and they go, oh, well, children don't come with an instruction manual and all kinds of other nonsense that I've heard all my life. And this normalizing of just being so deviated and getting more and more misaligned. This is why I'm constantly, fitness, because fitness is always coming back to sharpening yourself. I mean, I started going to the gym in like 1983 because, I mean, just to literally preserve what was left of my physical and psychological health. And, it was just something about, lifting weights that just viscerally felt so good, because deep within me, your body could feel that this is real, this interaction, this dance that you had with exercise and with weights, and, yoga practice starting in the early 80s, even though I kind of did gravitate more to like heavy weightlifting because it was just something about having something heavy to push off of and to push up against. It felt so just viscerally satisfying, because there were no, healthy people to really healthily kind of push off of. And so the weights really provided, that kind of satisfaction, and it really does, like, it kept me anchored to reality, and I would read, like, John Bradshaw was one of my favorite people to read in the late 80s, into like 1990, Melody Beattie, Barbara DeAngelis, and all of the Mars and Venus guy. And, and the sad thing about it was, I mean, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, I had the science on child abuse and the long-term effects of child abuse absolutely correct all my life. And no matter how much I dotted the I's and crossed the T's and had the science right, I mean, I lived it. My body was there. I'm telling you the adverse responses that my body is having to this, so just like people, again, having adverse responses to the jab and getting myocarditis and all of this stuff. I'm like, well, we got here because nobody was listening to children in the freaking family system, and they're going, oh, just get over it. Well, hey, just get over myocarditis, and not only your myocarditis, but your adult child mentality that, normalizes, bowing to fraudulent authority for the rest of your freaking life. I mean, all I keep writing on social media is, when does the cord ever get cut? Because when people are always, oh, we gotta, another election, like this normalization of grown people having leaders is just like, I think it's literally like our downfall.
Yeah.
Because
Catherine, I really appreciate how you're redefining fitness to include the psychological factors,
yeah,
because that's not talked about very much.
exactly.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
the seeing the family as a reflection, and a microcosm of the dysfunction that we're seeing in the world, that's not talked about either. So I think that what you're saying is super valuable. And
I swear, I swear, and I'm a nobody. I mean, like, I was so committed, literally. I made, again, not just physical, but mental fitness my life. I was such a truly naive fool all my life, because I really believed we lived in a fairly healthy society, and there's no way psycho satanic freaking, people would end up having all the leverage and all the freaking money, And so,
Well, that's one of like the bigger lies I've discovered as well, Catherine, is that like for the majority of my life, because I understand what you mean about like you speak my language because I speak out quite freely about generally the medical institution at large, and the abuses it commits, and that this is all like it's just one puzzle piece of a bigger picture. But I kind of presumed for the majority of my life that, for the most part, generally speaking, these institutions had our best interest in mind because, they're human beings, and not everybody is born a naturally born psychopath. Not everybody has that, genetic anomaly in them. And because it is quite rare, it's like less than 3% of people who are actually born with the actual mutation of psychopathy. And all the other psychopathy, like secondary psychopathy, is just like people who are abused and traumatized as a result of that. But yeah, most of my life I thought they had our best interest in mind because I felt like I didn't have a choice but to think that as well. And it is a psychological assault on people, especially when you're starting from a very young age. And this can, like, how people are formed mentally, with, perspectives or views or the environments they're put into can really affect how they develop. And it really is just like a chaotic shit show. Yeah. Because even the parasite class can't really predict how people are going to behave, but they are pretty good psychologists, and they do know how to like steer the wheel a little bit. Yeah. Where it's more into their control. So I had to learn the hard way how dirty it really all is. And like, when it affects your mind, if you have a messy mind, you have a messy life. And there's a reason why we have a saying like that in like several hundred years ago, we had people who would say these things like, maybe in their language or in their terminology or whatever, but it amounts to the same. And there's a reason why we had those, and people don't listen to these kind of warnings anymore. And so the parasite class knows that you start in the womb. And I've talked about this before, where they do start in the womb. They've certainly been starting in the womb for at least the 50s, at least, where they started, because it was like the 50s and 60s, and they started to do and I think it really boosted in the 70s, where they had the pharmaceutical companies like built, and because before that we didn't have big pharmaceutical companies. And then they started like, what does a pregnant woman do as soon as she finds out she's pregnant? She goes to her doctor. And then her doctor feeds her all kinds of pharmaceuticals that will immediately affect the fetus. And I think that's really where it all starts.
Well, I think it's ultrasound more than pharmaceuticals, for the pregnant women,
Yeah. Ultrasounds, any kind of like radiation poisoning, and that's affecting the brain, causing people. Then you've got fluoride in the water that the mother's consuming, and then the baby consumes. All of these things, like everybody... I've said this before, where people think it's just one thing or it's another thing. And then it's like, no. It's all of these things that is caused by one factor, and that's the parasite class. But all of these things are being caused by them. So there's only one way to really fix all the problems. It's to remove the parasite class. And then we can start to like heal everything else.
Well, the problem I think that Catherine's alluding to is that the parents, the family unit, is mimicking the thoughts of the parasite class. So that, that then the standard parenting is a failure, right? You can look around at the world and see that how children are being parented and how they're growing up is not leading to moral outcomes, right? It's leading to chaos and confusion. And so
yeah,
the
the
question
normal.
is, like, what are the programs that parents are adopting from the government? Because I think that's an interesting thing you said, that parents are basically like mini me's of the government itself and
Yep.
adopting these programs. So what are these programs that you're observing?
It just happened to me today, right? I'm just gonna like I'll try to make this as quick as I can. How long does this go until, by the way?
But we
We'll
don't have a hard ending. Sometimes
Yeah,
they
we
have
don't
for
really have a
2 hours.
hard ending,
Okay.
but it'll probably be like maybe around 5 or like 10 before 5, something like that,
Okay.
at least.
So, okay, like I have like I mean I don't even sometimes realize how much being so focused and committed to health and fitness mentally, physically, and spiritually has sort of like defined me away from a lot of other people. And so like I've done it for so much for so long, like it's just a knee-jerk reaction for me. So when I go on social media and I watch grown people, blaming Biden or blaming this one or blaming that one and not taking any responsibility that they enabled these freaking people for decades, I just like literally I'm like ready to like go ballistic. But anyway, so I used to work for in around 2007, 8, 9, and like 10-ish. I lived in Boulder, Colorado. I moved there in 2007 and I started working for doing massage therapy for bands like Steve Miller was one of the first people I ever massaged at Red Rocks, Pat Benatar's band, Willie Nelson, like some other people, and some of which like I kind of got on my own as well, like Five Finger Death Punch and like, but anyway, so I've known her for like a while. And then I kind of, my mother died and I ended up moving back to Brooklyn in 2009. And so like she always had this mentality of, oh, I got no time, I'm doing blah 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 blah, blah, like always being in this like frenzy, managing how many different massage, like she's got all these massage therapist people working under her, all over like the world kind of. And me again being so focused and committed to healthy relationship skills and healthy families. So she's got this, she had a daughter that, of course the father is not in the picture. And then like, so what ends up happening is, she ends up having like another kid with some guy, who like from Turkey, who's not even, she was living in like Jersey City, near Jersey City at the time. And I don't want to make this a long story, but I was writing to her on Messenger before, kind of saying, yeah, like just had the idea that maybe, she could do massage, and yoga for people abused in the music industry and like Hollywood. Um I asked her if she knew like anyone maybe that was, and kind of offer services, and she kind of was like replying back, oh, people have to want it, they don't want to come forward and all of this stuff. But then when I asked her like if she just was aware of any, she kind of responded back to me with the kind of usual sort of like defensiveness that she used to always say to me all the time about not having any time and she can't save the world and I got a 12-year-old, and she actually wrote in the message that she was a victim of this, the second guy that she had a kid with. Because back then, like I was around her at the time. There's even like a picture of me holding her, second son when he was like a baby. And I remember thinking to myself, and like here I am, like the dummy that I am, working on myself. I actually have like shame, maybe too much shame. Like I would be literally ashamed to do what these people do. And I'm over here trying to hold this higher bar. I've been like the fool that I am because I didn't want to repeat the complete dysfunction, and I didn't want to do to children what was done to me. So I'm over here like an idiot working on myself and trying to be healthier and fitter and build healthier relationships, before I ever brought a kid into this world, which of course never happened because the freaking working on yourself just never ends. And other people, and I'm like, oh, if I meet a guy, like, you got to go slow, you got to build healthy relationships, like in a smart, healthy way. And I'm fucking reading Barbara DeAngelis and all of this stuff. And then these people just like, they don't give a shit. They just have a kid with anybody. And then she's going to call herself a victim. And I was never ever seen as a victim ever in my life. Since I was like 6 freaking years old, and all I hear today are grown people crying victim when they are the ones who chose these people. They don't go slow. They don't get to know anybody. The guy was like a Turkish immigrant. He's like 10 years younger than her at least. She I think likes to be like the cougar or something. And then she's gonna write. He's got no money. He was working in a gas station. And at the time when she had, like the second baby, I was there. I was there like while she was pregnant and all this stuff. And I thought to myself, like what's going on? Like why are people just so reckless when it comes to like being healthy, being a healthy parent, choosing a healthy partner? And it's almost like, again, the people are in on it. Like she has this money and she's massaged, this one and that one and blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to being a parent or choosing healthy partners, it's just normal for that shit to just be completely like corroded. And the system is like literally okay with it.
But
And
I kind of think that's almost part of the parasites class conditioning program on a large scale is, again, messy mind, messy life. That means, all we have to do is scramble all this shit up there so that they can't think too good. And then they're going to take care of themselves. It's just going to be a free for all. And, now, like, one of the things my husband often says is now people are giving themselves, trophies for being part of the race to the bottom, and people they're proud of being in a state, like in a mental capacity of mental illness, and they're proud of this, and it's a race to the bottom, and it is a race to the bottom. People are trying to compete with each other about how, like, oh no, I'm more mentally ill than you are. That should be kind of embarrassing for people on a large scale. And I think if we weren't so, like, I think the conditioning of like the minds, like with propaganda and stuff, that's certainly like how it's always been done, and it's the first of it. But like with the medication, the medicine, pharmaceuticals, and water. Poison water, it certainly is part of it. But Brittany, I think you have a question too, so I want you to jump in there. So I wanted you to jump in with that real quick.
Yeah, it was more, instead of a question, just an observation in terms of propaganda and specifically surrounding the family industrial complex. It's just something that I've looked at and noticed. But for a very, very long time, the man was the leader of the home. He was the head of the house, and he was the one who guided the family. And for a very long time, religion is what guided people's value in having families just to begin with. And so around like the 60s, moving into the 70s, we were kind of going through a shift from some of those more traditional values to more free, loving society. And honestly, it's been since about that long since we've seen the slow deterioration of the family unit.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying religion is perfect or it's right, but at least I think some of the values of a man and a woman being together, being monogamous, and trying to have the mutual goal of staying together. Statistics show time and time again that kids have better chances in life if they have the mother and the father there. They're not perfect, you know, because we live in a world of polarity. We don't have just rainbows and sunshines. We get shit because we all have to heal something within us. And we're not going to be perfect every single day, especially raising our families. We're going to have lesser moments where we're not the best example. That stuff will always be there. We will always have opportunities to heal ourselves. But we have to actually do that. And so I don't know that a perfect, healthy family society has ever existed, but I think every single family will go through the exact same process that we all go through on an individual level. We all go through healing and we all kind of operate as one family unit in our household. And we all kind of have different phases and development of that. But the best kids produced in society do come from whole families. And ever since the 70s, when things were all love, you know, and smoking weed and all that stuff, ever since then, we've had the slow decline of the family unit and the introduction to like Marxist principles into our society. Yuri Bezmenov warned us about that in 1984 or 6. It was an even number year. And he is a former KGB agent that would help program society by the decade for the Soviet Union. And he spoke about how that those things were coming here. And if you read the Communist Manifesto, it specifically states that for communism to be successful and to infiltrate a society, you have to have the destruction of the family unit. And so I think as far as propaganda is concerned, I think we can look towards the 70s and really see where a lot of this started really being pushed heavy in the United States. And I was born in 91. Ever since I've been alive, you know, things have been very sexualized. And there have just been tons of different forms of propaganda intended to divide people and their families.
So sad.
And you're right, Brittany. Just really quick, Catherine, and then you can jump back in here. And you're right, Brittany, the destruction of the family unit is definitely a main goal, I think. And, you know, but I will just say that I would like people to consider, and I've said this before, that we are living human physical realm experiences as inner spiritual parts of that larger source. And like we're here in this physical in order to experience certain things so that we can develop and understand these kind of things that go on, because there's no point in growth unless we have, you know, hardships in our life. And I would just like people to consider as well that that when we have children, whether they're in, you know, 2-parent homes or whether it's a single parent situation or whatever it is, that if we kept in mind that if our children, you know, we do the best we can, you know, unless we're like psychopaths. Otherwise, we're all, I think a lot of us are trying and doing the best I can, even though like our parents obviously like had a lot of issues, a lot of things that went wrong. But if we could all just keep in mind that like if our children, the children that we have now, like us, if they turn out even that little bit better than we did, then that's like a win. That's a win. So, I mean, like all of us here have had like, you know, hardships in our past and like things that we've dealt with. And I think a lot of our generation and the generations that are surrounding us have had this and they don't know how to like dismantle it or like, you know, do things like get their thoughts, emotions, and actions in order so that they can really heal properly, fully, and then maybe let go of some of that ego and go, okay, I want my kids to turn out better than I don't just want them to have a better life than I had. I want them to develop spiritually healthier and better than me. And I think that kind of thought, like if people kept that kind of thought in their heads as they go along with this kind of subject, talking about families, this is going to go even a long way for healing yourself
You know,
as an
I
individual.
think a lot of people are living in a bit of a fantasy world, and they're very disconnected from actual psychology and disconnected from themselves. And those principles, the social emotional education is absent in schools, and they're making, you know, kindergartners focus more on academics and social, emotional, relational
and
development.
adult
That's
topics.
natural, right? Yeah, and like really inappropriate information. And so there is like this tendency I'm seeing, or this trend of just very unconscious procreation, you know, where I'm seeing multiple couples getting pregnant very fast and then splitting up like at the birth or shortly after, or right before. I mean, these kids are right out of the
They don't even
gate,
care.
you know, yeah.
They
And
don't
then
even
the
try to stay together.
right, and economic, well, and like you were saying, Catherine, just an ignorance in a sense of what it means to be healthy in couplehood, you know, in relationship. It's very immature. It's very fantastical and not connected to reality. And the kids seem to be an afterthought. And there's this whole trend of promoting daycare and
Yeah.
school as like babysitters, as
Yeah.
if, you know, to open up both parents to go and work and to everybody focus on their career. And it
Yeah.
really feels like kids are just left in the dust as
Yeah,
totally
they've been made to be like socially
Yeah.
conditioned.
Yeah.
People are being made to think or conditioned to think that children are collateral damage, that they are weapons to be used against the other and against others. And this is inversion. I see this, like what you're talking about, Leslie, in full shining colors, because it is absolutely obvious that it's inversion and that it is done on purpose to be used as a weapon against us who are doing what we can, even if we're not perfect, so that our children just turn against us. Like, I mean, I just watched some video clip. Well, it was several weeks ago now, but this girl jumps on her, you know, live feed. This is where TikTok is like becoming a problem, or Snapchat. They just jump onto the live and like, I just sued my parents today because I didn't ask to be born. I'm like proud of it, fully proud of it. And so this is like what you're talking about. It sounds like children being conditioned to be weaponized against their own parents. And that's making everything worse.
You mean
So
by the other parent or
by
like,
everyone, you know, they condition the children, and then the children themselves are against the parents, against the one parents, against the other parent, against everybody else.
Well, look at
who's
the kids programming, you know, whether it's Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, there's so many shows basically with kids raising themselves. You know, Zach and Cody, you know, is one example where they're
thought about it
basically
like
have
that.
rich
Yeah.
parents and they're
We don't have
running
that.
the hotel or the ship. And
Clarissa explains
there's
it
a
all.
bunch of them. There's a bunch
Yeah.
of these types of things. And I think that, you know, kids are observing a radical disrespect for the adults and the parents, but also I think parents themselves, they're not earning the respect. And if you're not present and you're, you know, then you're not really raising your children. And if you're not clear on your what's important, you know, and you're acting it out through your behaviors, then kids are not going to see what's important, and they're going to feel like they're not important because the value isn't placed on them, the time with them, right? It's like rush, rush, rush. It's more important to do your sport. It's more important to get your grades. Catherine, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, you know, I just can't help it. Over the decades, I just felt like I had no choice but to become really obsessed with, you know, just doing things nature's way. Like you know, and especially, right, child rearing and completely skipping over healthy stages of a child's development is like the clearest way to just see how deviated from nature that our man-made for-profit insane system is. And so I just became really obsessed with just doing things nature's way, slowing down, right, being more present, trying to incorporate nature's process in as like everything that you do, because watching people leaving it out, like eliminating nature's process from everything that people do is that's what genetic modification is called, is the elimination of doing things like the legitimate way. And so I mean, like yoga practice, for example, I mean, like what I feel like it really can teach people is building your poses in life with integrity. Okay, here's the fancy pose, maybe you want to be an attorney or a doctor or whatever, but this is where you are now, in child's pose, or you can barely reach your toes now. But if you just keep working at it and breathing and creating the conditions, then your body will eventually be able to do these things. And I was studying all that because I could see society and people are in, and then it's gotten even worse over decades. People in positions of authority, and they have the title, they have the PhD and all that crap after their name. Like I never chased letters after my name. Like I just always wanted to be just a simple, healthy, organic person, someone, and then maybe get letters after your name if you don't have to get into, tens of thousands of dollars in debt to have it. But, and now today, again, like there's like, like in immeasurable, incalculable amounts of people in positions, not doing their poses with integrity. Like that's why I liked yoga practice, because it was all about doing your poses with integrity. If you can't do the fancy pose, you just don't freaking do it, and you just do the pose that you can freaking do. But of course, the monetary system, our completely fraudulent monetary system, and like so many people just go along and for the money, they're going to do a completely fraudulent pose. They're going to, be a completely, toxic ingredient, person in this, pose that they really can't do. And I really thought, like, since the 80s and 90s, people were kind of more on to this stuff. Like I thought people were really kind of really getting it since the 80s. And all the self-help books that would line the bookstores and all of this stuff, and therapeutic,
and
but
just real quick before you go on, but I want you to keep going. It's funny you mentioned self-help books, because I think I remember an episode where even Mark Passio was like, they said they were going to line the walls with DIY self-help, spirituality, like BS books. They said they were going to do it just to muddy up the waters. And he's certainly right, because there is a lot of nonsense out there. And I would just say really quick before, and I'll give it back to you, Catherine, is that when people are looking for some sort of self-help, the only place you're going to find that self-help is inside. You've got to start inside first, because you're not going to get any of the answers from anybody else. That's just how it is. You have to start with yourself. So please.
I mean, see, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I wanted to mention, Aaron Russo, and he did an interview with Alex Jones, which I don't really care for Alex Jones anymore, but, Aaron Russo, who was, he did the, America Freedom to Fascism documentary, and he was like a movie producer, and he would talk about in this interview, I mean, I don't know, he talked about the family system being dismantled by design. I mean, it makes sense that if there's a war against our health and they put fluoride in the water, and Rockefeller took over the American Medical Association in like 1910 or whatever the heck it is, that right, like the best way to really destroy people's health is to destroy the family, turn parents into like adult children, and so keeping people in essentially a perpetual state of debt, in a perpetual, like, I mean, I basically just call it in the 90s, I spent about 7 years working as an emergency medical technician for the New York City Fire Department, and you learn all the signs and symptoms of like when people are going into shock. And, one of the early symptoms is a state of altered mental status when people are being, they're bleeding out. You ask them, what your name is, where are you, what's the day, and all of that stuff. And the real tragedy is, just like if someone was advancing into like states of hypothermia or something, they get more disoriented. They're literally spiraling into like debt. I just say debt. And if there isn't someone there to help them and help them get more oriented, they're just going to continue to make more poor choices and just keep spiraling further and further down. And I unfortunately, I swear to God, I believe that is like the majority of the population is literally in a state of altered mental status from the lack of true adults, of true parenting, and not, again, not just parenting, but any healthy adult anywhere. Because I mean, the amount of child abuse that I've come to learn about, over all these decades, and what adults do to children, and how they traffic children, and they're sex trafficking them out, and they're grooming them, and again, the Scouts honor, and like, I mean, children have no one. I mean, it's almost as if like 90% of adults are like seriously adult children, just deficient, impaired, altered mental status people. And it is just terrifying. The amount of people, that are just at war and vampiring and sucking the life out of children. And I swear to God, like, I'm terrified. I swear to God.
Let's not forget CPS. You can thank them. And they started, and people don't understand that CPS originally started with the orphan train. Go look it up.
Yeah, it's that's a scary, very scary segment of our government.
Yeah.
The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez. It's a series. I mean, it's just really painful to watch, but this attorney who wrote a book called The Poverty Industry, and just, I mean, like, all the profiting off of child protective services. And, this is why I'll just say this and then I'll stop. Like, I've had such an issue with money all my life. I mean, honestly speaking, I really never wanted it, because like, I saw what was happening in society, and how everything that should be free of money and healthy, again, like family, community, I mean, even clean water, they put a dollar sign on. Everything that they put a dollar sign on gets destroyed. And I knew, with every cell of my being decades ago, that what was missing in life was just simple, helping, giving, and caring for free. Like the family system, there's not supposed to be monetary exchanges. There's not
supposed to be a reward system, people. Yeah, and people think that they should get pat on the back for just doing the correct thing.
Yeah, people are people have been so Pavlovian conditioned by fiat currency. And if it isn't attached to everything, they think like, like when doing stuff, for the simple value, like doing things without money at this point has way more value than doing anything with the fiat attached to it actually destroys it. And so like I've always been, again, like for literally decades, just thinking if I just do the right thing, have healthy relationship skills, money would just sort of inevitably kind of come if the monetary system was legitimate and if it was truly backed and aligned with anything real, because, I had to be committed to my health decades ago. I had to take care of my health and nothing was going to stop me. I had to build my health because I felt like it was completely wrecked. And I could feel that this need for money was always like pulling and pulling and pulling me away from, being committed to repairing and building my health up. And I was just like, I'm going to just do the right thing, speak the truth. I literally made like an experiment in life, and I'm just going to watch what happens if I do, just do fitness, speak the truth, and let's see if money just, like naturally comes. And of course it doesn't. And so that was enough for me to know that the monetary system was utterly fraudulent. And I just wish more people understood that and kind of had more guts to just not sacrifice things that have real value for this freaking piece of shit toilet paper, like you should just wipe your ass with it and flush it down the goddamn toilet.
Good point,
Yeah,
Catherine.
I think Brittany has a question too.
Oh, not necessarily.
Okay.
It was it was a while back.
That's okay.
Do you want to share your thought?
Yeah.
I honestly forgot.
Well, if it comes back to you,
Yeah. Just
Rick-
jump in.
Yeah.
jump in.
But I did want to like real quick say, Catherine, what you're saying about, money just coming to you, like if you start like doing what's morally right. I will say, like, yeah, money ain't gonna fall off trees, you ain't gonna just be overwhelmed with like tons of, Federal Reserve notes because you're doing something that's moral. But I will say, as soon as my husband and I started doing this kind of work, things actually just got socially better. Like, I mean, it's not so hard. It's not such a struggle to just like live normally, pay our bills and whatever. It's not because we get more money for it, but like we have actually unburdened ourselves from the emotional weight, the spiritual weight of being under like the, stress from the oppression. Like we don't feel so much like the more and more I feel like money doesn't matter, the easier it is just to like live a normal, regular middle class life, which is what I think most people would be happy with. So like as soon as you stop going, I don't give a shit if I even have like $1 in my bank account. And the more you do that, like I've been doing that for years, kind of like subconsciously. And it's like, I was like struggling, like it was so hard. Just to, like all I did was stress out about just living. But as soon as I let go of like the emotional attachment to I have to have money to live, as soon as that happened, things got easier, just like that. I mean, it was like not just like that really, but my mind changed just like that. And over the course of years, I started to get into like in tune with that kind of thinking. And things did get easier. And it's not such a burden anymore because I think half of the struggles that we have is because there is a subconscious, unspoken, spiritual burden that we are carrying on our backs, that there is so much grief, so much hardship, so much bullshit, so much nonsense, and so much of a perceived financial burden on the whole world that we're all feeling it collectively within us. So this tears us up a lot. It divides us. It splits us up into a way where we cannot no longer be functional together. We can't even like build a community.
It puts us into a fight or flight. It puts us in a
Yes,
trauma state,
exactly.
right? A survival mode. And I wanted to kind of highlight and expand on something you said, Catherine, about, with your example of doing trauma work in New York City and seeing the physical effects of shock, and the disorientation. And it made me think about um, psychological shock as well, and psychological states of survival, and how that leads people to operating reactively and irrationally and not integrated, not holistic inside oneself, right? And you lose orientation about the big picture, orientation of what's really going on in the world. And studying some of the work of Irene Lyon, who's a somatic therapist, and she really emphasizes the way to heal our nervous systems is through orienting in the
Yeah.
present moment, literally orienting to where you are in the room, looking around, orienting to yourself, what's happening, physiologically, what's happening inside
Right.
your head. So there's this importance around orientation. And when we're living in this world, it's just, a shit show, and it's getting everybody every day up in arms, up in their animal brain, the reptile brain. The frontal lobes aren't really online. And instead, there's these psychological states of trauma and reactivity, right? So one of the solutions is really is orientation again into the present moment, and soothing the nervous system and being able to see what's really going on in the world. Because I think, like you're saying, people are have the blinders on and are just in survival mode, then you're not oriented to the reality of the truth of what's happening. And it's like, I think that's where you're desperately, Catherine, in your work, trying to bring back the attention of people to what's really happening right in front of their own eyes, instead of just being off in this like fantasy world or this reactive lifestyle, right? That's just getting us further and further away from health.
Yeah,
And
where it's a
just
race to the bottom, Leslie.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
Straight
what I'm,
down.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, all my life, people literally just made it normal. I came down the basement just because, the roommate came downstairs and I didn't want to be, distracting or anything. But, like I was coming from the mindset of, I'm trying to build my health mentally, physically, and spiritually, coming from that horrible, not just family, but community experience where I came from, where I'm being criminalized for just trying to be healthy. And then so when you get older and you go out and you're trying to get a job, I mean, so I had the same attitude about a work environment. Like, I'm not going to be and, spending my life in some dysfunctional work environment that's going to, I mean, this was my attitude. Like, if I couldn't find a work environment that was conducive to helping me build my health mentally, physically, or spiritually, I didn't care about the money. I was out of there. And I was literally committed to that. And there's not enough people who are. And that's the problem. Like, I mean, when you normalize, hey, yeah, so it costs some of my spiritual and psychological health for a paycheck to pay my bills, then again, the people really only have like their, themselves to blame for the, the system, or and the genocide. If you're like, how can people possibly think that you're going to get anywhere, that sacrificing your health, even, they think temporarily, like, how it can't possibly get you to a good place, I became obsessed with, learning this stuff, decades ago about, present moment awareness, and how the present moment, breaks the vicious cycle. And, right, like, it's what you do in the present moment is going to, create your future. And if you're living in the past or whatever, or you're not in the present moment and you're just, whatever, like chasing a paycheck, you're just going to keep perpetuating this endless, cycle and taking the past and just constantly recycling it. And that's how we got here. Like, I just can't believe, I literally can't believe that the people in this country like allowed this stuff to happen. I mean, I had so much hope. I spent time working at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies, which was this like retreat center in Rhinebeck, New York. I was there actually when the World Trade Centers got attacked because, during my time working for the New York City Fire Department, and I could just literally see how dysfunctional the system is, and how, this job is not about making changes. It's not about really improving anything. It literally is about everybody and everything around me was always about perpetuating the vicious cycle for a paycheck. And everywhere I went, I was the only one who was literally committed to wanting to improve things, wanting things to change. And that's why I did fitness, because when you do things right, this is not brain surgery. The laws of nature and physics will give you the correct answer, and you will actually see transformation over time. This is not rocket freaking science. And you can be a cop. This is what I don't understand about the world. This is in your face. You could have police, you could have fire people, emergency responders, decade after decade after decade, and yet lo and behold, nothing changes. Societies never change. Like the endless vicious cycle, the endless dysfunction and crime continues to perpetuate. Now, why would that be? I was a personal trainer. That's what I used to do in the 80s, before there was a such thing as personal training certifications. In order, because I was so obsessed with wanting to improve society, and yet, you could be a cop retire with a pension and leave the system that you worked in worse than when you started. And nobody's going, what the hell is wrong with that? Oh yeah, we need more cops. Oh yeah, put more cops on the street. Like, get the hell out of here. These people are not there to change a effing fucking thing.
Mhm.
They're
And
there to
even like the governor of California proposing more therapists, more counseling interns need to go
Exactly.
into the schools. It's like this Band-Aid. It's never getting to the
cha-ching,
root of
cha-ching,
things.
cha-ching,
Yeah.
cha-ching,
Yeah.
cha-ching.
And then
That's
you have
It is.
it is.
unhealthy people without the experience, maybe even of parenting themselves, plugged into this dysfunctional system without even impacting like the parental unit and the family system. And a lot of therapists, don't even want to do the systems work with parents and when they're doing therapy with children, because it's so frustrating. A lot of therapists who work with children will be just like, I'm just working with the kids. I can't even stand dealing with the parents, because their issues are so much the problem and they don't see
Exactly.
it. They're not going to get the help for their child with the mindset of they need to change, but instead they're looking at the children that they're the problem.
Well,
And
yeah,
it's sick,
you just, if it, so again, you just kind of reminded me of, in the Monsters series about the Menendez brothers, that's exactly what they do. I mean, here is the father that's literally raping his boys. Mostly the youngest one took the brunt, and the mother is like in on it. And they take the boys to therapy, like fix them, and this is why I'm like, oh my God. Like, I mean, I always knew, I've always pointed fingers at authority all my life. They are the problem. Authority is the problem. They're the ones that should be going to therapy, and not the kid, not the subordinate at all. And I'm really, I just can't help but like, I repeat myself that I'm just terrified, how children have just been here to inherit the shame, guilt, and the pollution for, the so-called authority. And the parents are really like kind of working for the government and corporations. And I mean, the things that I've learned about, satanic ritual abuse and, the Franklin Credit Union scandal before Jeffrey Epstein, child sex rings, and the war against children is, oh my God, how many adults, are in on, if you watch the trials of Gabriel Fernandez, all these so-called adults, again, like all the system is about is, just giving the adult children a job, but like meanwhile, nothing changes. The same problems, not only do they persist, they get worse over time.
And then these, government employees or these, people working in these systems are getting burnt out, and they end up getting cut off from their own heart. They, and are often like taking on stereotypes and, seeing people in a very negative, I don't know, it's just so dysfunctional, and it's not heart-based. I think that, we see that ultimately there's psychological manipulation going on, like this mind control seems to be the main weapon, right? And it's weaponizing parenting, right? And then, parents are becoming less and less active parents, more on their phones, like talk about, external influences being the parent of kids. It's like give the kid the tablet, parents are on their phone, the kids are on that phone, parents aren't present with their kids. They're receiving all this input from the, this garbage in social media and the fake, just sort of information that's going across. And so there's this huge disconnection, right, of all parties from their own self, from their own body, mind, spirit. And it's this unconsciousness that is perpetuated, and also the belief in authority, right? When we talk about the parents being kind of mini-me's of the government, I think it centers around this idea of the belief in an external authority that is then just creating a structure that we're just plugging ourselves in mindlessly, right?
Yeah, to go with that, that was actually something that I remembered regarding like kids growing into like emotional adults, but relating to what you'd meant on the government whole thing and needing like an authoritative figure. Just on the flip side of that, I know government is kind of being wielded and weaponized for not good right now, but it doesn't mean that the system in and of itself is a terrible concept, because ultimately if we had people who were moral operating, things would look a whole lot different. And I actually think that we have so many grown children who honestly grow into sheep, and I use that word on purpose because you guys know what I mean by that, how we all say the masses, we refer to them as the masses. I really think kids do need straight up direction. I think they need a leader. They need a guide. They need somebody to tell them how it's going to be. Because if left to come to their own conclusion, chances are good it's going to be a bit distorted, because kids don't have that logical comprehension going on in their minds. And I think that we see a lot of adults who grow up, they were kids and they were looking for a leader, and maybe they didn't get it. And so they started soaking things up and absorbing things from the exterior world. But ultimately maybe they didn't have a guide in their life. And so they're always kind of, I've noticed that too, where people are perpetually looking outward. And I think sometimes we should look out. I think sometimes we should not listen to ourselves because we are wrong sometimes. Sometimes the wrong voice is talking at us and we should not listen to that. If we have like self-hatred going on, I think it could be very valuable to look out and get a reflection, because sometimes it can bop us back on course. But at the same time, I I guess I have all these different pieces and thoughts that I've been kind of writing notes down, and they're all kind of popping up here. But I think we need a sense of leadership and guidance. And I don't think it's wrong because to have, okay, leader is not the right word. Representation is, I think, a better word for the government. Okay, because long ago, like in history, there were villages, right? And they would get attacked. They would need protection and stuff like that. And at one point, somebody it was like the English area of the world, they were dubbed like king. So I think that we have representation roles to just do the government stuff. Okay, let's say Germany's going to attack us or Russia's going to attack us. Okay, we don't have a president, we don't have a representative. Okay, now what, everybody? It's hard enough to try to get anybody to have a fluid conversation. Why would we try to organize in the heat of a moment and then figure out what we're going to do as the United States? I think we do need a sense of representation. And as it relates to a smaller family kind of unit thing, I think kids need that. It's just at some point, I think we need to start handing them more responsibility and showing them, like as a leader, showing them how to lead themselmes.
How to function. Yeah, and I'm just going to say, Brittany, I agree with that on the larger scale because me and my husband have to talk about this all the time, is that we are all about having a free society based without false authority running every aspect of our lives. But unfortunately, we are currently living in a society full of dumb animals out there acting like they can just do whatever they want, and that because they've all been like conditioned and psychologically
and programmed, and then they're unconscious.
Yeah, and they're just a bunch of people they're running around like dumb animals. So like I did like a whole segment of this on the radio show before about how the reason why our founding fathers, who I do think were like the anarchists of their day, maybe not calling them
the rebels of their time,
the rebels of their time, they even said, do not split into two parties, do not create a large government. This is why they created the constitutional republic, and the history that's actually written about it that people think they know about it. It's not correct. They're not getting the full truth of it. And just like everything else, they think it's this one. It actually isn't. Our founding fathers created the constitutional republic so to keep in line the people, all the dumb animals out there who they're not ready to be where we're at. They're not ready there in their heads because they're adult children, like you said, they're failure to launch, and they're not ready to let go of it. And I do think that it's a huge process. And I think that
and how did they get that way? Like, I feel like
because they've had centuries. I think it's centuries and centuries of like trauma, abuse because of oppression, because of the Roman Empire, because of the royal crown, all of this stuff. And the reason why people, left the old country to come here, I mean, of course, the crown and the Spanish crown had their own designs of it and funded it, really. But the reason why people were leaving to come here is because of that spiritual weight of oppression. And they're like, fuck this, I need to get out of this.
And freedom of whatever they want to think and feel.
And from there, it started going downhill again because this was a chance. I mean, before the Pilgrims, or before the Protestants even came in, the Puritans, I should say, came in, and the East Coast was settled by the English, the official story. There was actually a settlement that was created in Florida, like about something like 80 years before the official founding of the country, before Columbus. And it was a Spanish colony, and the Spanish, he had been commissioned by, or the crown had commissioned him to sail across the ocean to discover America. And what happened was that Spanish captain, that specific guy, he landed in Florida, And he built a colony, and it was a colony that was the Spanish. Anybody who landed there was the natives, and they all lived in a community in a normal way for like 80 years. So like this is then you have the English coming in and starting to distort stuff. And I won't say English because that's not entirely fair. I will say the crown, the political structure of the crown, because that's the real problem over there. And this is like a downhill. And then we had, if you were to look at history, I think this is like them trying to undo centuries and centuries of like Roman Empire trauma kind of stuff. And it's just even before that, you know, going all the way back to like Mesopotamia. And, you know, I just like, I read this kind of history because I too, Catherine, and someone who's going to go like, how did it get like this? Like, where did this start? There has to be a root cause to this. There, like, what happens that made us go downhill? And I think that when the founding fathers started, they saw this as a problem and they wanted to try to correct it, and they were doing it with the way that they knew. And they're like, okay, let's build a constitutional republic, and we'll do it before there's an official government. And I mean, that I think that that's what they were trying to do. And then we had like a golden age in the 50s come up.
The people didn't appreciate it, you know, and
no, nobody appreciated any of it.
They didn't exercise their rights. Like, you know, again, when I got into, you know, fitness, it wasn't just physical, it was about psychological. And when I talked about exercise, I didn't mean just physical. I meant, you know, you have to exercise your rights. You have to exercise your presence on this earth if you want to, you know, like reach your healthy potential. I just didn't think it was so radical to reach your healthy freaking potential. But everybody just seemed so happy to kind of, you know, be down here and then just stay very childlike for the rest of their lives, and have you know, leader parents. I know my background thing is like looking kind of weird, but you know, it's just yeah, I you know, I just see everything as a health crisis. Everything is just like, to me, I stuck to health and fitness because I knew health was the only thing that was real. I never believed in politics because it just isn't real. You know,
it's just a construct anyway. And even our founding fathers is like, no, we're not playing a political game where we're putting training wheels on for the people who are still in dumb animal mentality. Like,
I want to reflect a little bit on what Brittany was saying, and what, you know, the subsequent conversation about, you know, this idea of healthy leadership. And, you know, and I think that where that's gotten twisted in our world is equating leadership with authority and coercion and, for, you know, violence, really.
They can sometimes overlap
in
some individuals, unfortunately.
And I want to shift that idea, you know, to more like a stewardship, right? You know, and if we are born, you know, into a world where we're valued, and life is valued, and nature is valued, and the adults are embodying that, and they themselves are secure in themselves, right? It's going to be a very different type of parenting. And so, you know, the foundation of healthy psychology is a secure emotional attachment at birth, from, you know, for children to be born into, you know, a family where there is secure emotional connection. And because children are completely vulnerable when they come into the world, and it is the, you know, the caregivers that are setting the stage for their unfoldment, their natural unfoldment. And I think that nature is very wise, and if given a safe container, you know, where those psychological and physical needs are met, then children will, in a sense, flourish without a lot of need for adults to, like, heavy-handedly, you know, tell them what to do. The problem is that, you know, this relational attachment is is, I think, one of the things being targeted by splitting families apart, not even supporting parents in their own psychological healing, not educating, and giving parents sort of the safe, secure, abundant, nest to bring children into the world, right? And to be able to demonstrate and role model. I think it's like this idea of representation. I think of like role modeling, right? And so if we start with the family unit, and the parents are these healthy role models of mental health, psychological integration, that they're steady, secure, self-valuing, understand the interconnection to other people, the importance of how you treat others, understand what healthy development is for children. That would help a child to develop a balanced brain, a secure sense of self, right?
Yeah.
And to be able to support children in discovering who they are born to be, right? As opposed to putting kids in tracks that the external societies.
Yeah, telling them who they are. And while it's good to reflect a child's, qualities to them, it's just as important for them to be able to lead and direct themselves and explore things and figure out themselves.
And
not
that's
everybody's
a good point
got
to
to
bring
play
up,
soccer,
Leslie.
it's like this steady foundation. And I think the crisis we're in is we have, the adults and the people raising children, having children, are not fully adults, right? They are like,
it's a truly
their own
serious
stuff.
pandemic. It's like a pandemic of adult children, and it's not being taken seriously like at all.
And so
that's
the
the real
government
pandemic.
or the societal, whatever these social engineers and the systems that this matrix that we're in is not supporting parents and adults to grow up. It's actually perpetuating their eternal childhood, right? And so kids, I don't know, something big does need to happen. And maybe, like you're saying, Brittany, maybe more directed to the, maybe we need a little bit more flashing red lights about, like what is healthy and what is
an alarm system that goes on, and the parents need to be in control of that. But that's a great point to bring up, is that like when people like they hear us talk about stuff like, government, they automatically think, because everybody's got to go political with it. Like, no, listen with your brain and your ears instead of your mouth. But when there has to be that kind of love, that type of authority in nature. Nature has an authority all of its own. It's going to do what it does, period. And you're not going to change anything about it. But with parents and that's the microcosm and the macrocosm, and parents are part of that. When you have a child, we are not the ruler of our children. We don't own our children, because we are meant to be there naturally as a guide, to lead by example. And we've talked about this before as well. Like it's important we lead by example. Others will emulate it. And it doesn't even matter if we see them do it. They will do it, because that's what human beings do. So, if you have a society that's built around emulating dumb animal behavior, then that's the result you're going to get. This is cause and effect. And it's the root causes because you got some little mischievous parasites in the water creating this. That's the root cause. And we can't heal. We can't get past all of these other things.
And it's like
until we heal the parasites in the water.
Right. The parasites are there, and they're in the adults, right, that don't know that they're being consumed. Yeah. And then they, are passing that on to the children. And then we have, parents who are more conscious in this world, right, who are, I think, have a dilemma about how controlling to be with their children.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because it may be called for to be much more directive to protect your child from the power of what's external. Because it's like, if you let because I see this, my power my influence, the respect that my kids have for me gets impacted by how much they're consuming these external messages, right? And if I were to go back in time, I would probably be more controlling in a way, because I was very kind of free flowing, parent. And
Me too.
I feel like my
I get
kids
that.
are really smart and they see a lot, but they're also tangled into this crazy dilemma of the world, and
Yeah.
psychologically hurt, in some ways, right? So yeah, it's complicated.
Can I
Yeah.
sorry, I just wanted to go back to, I just mentioned, I kind of can't help but talk about it because I just watched it, and how much this like normalization of child abuse just persists in society and like around the world, because even in this series about the Menendez brothers, like the father was from Cuba. He was actually from the elite in Cuba. So he really came to the US with that, oh, I'm gonna, have the American dream, and he already had the mindset for it. But what was always kind of talked about in the series was the parents, I mean, wealthy parents, trying to, pushing their children too hard, being controlling, domineering, I mean, along with like raping them. And this guy actually believed, he in the series, he would talk about, and again, I don't have no idea how accurate this is, but like, oh, the Spartans and the Romans or something, used to like rape each other in order to like make one another tougher. And I mean, because I grew up with that mentality of people literally trying to tell me and convince me that abuse was somehow good for you, that it made you stronger and built your character. And I mean, like, again, when I was, young, I knew this was absolutely ridiculous, which was another reason that drove me to do exercise and to, like work out and lift weights, because, viscerally, I was determined to find out where the line gets drawn between, too much stress and weight that will actually break you down, and the right amount of stress that will actually build you up. So to prove that
Fascinating.
their theory of, oh, abuse is, it builds character. And I was just like, oh yeah, well,
There's
my
a
body,
line. There's a
Yeah, there's
line
a
that can be
line
crossed.
between like,
Yeah.
teaching your children like hard knock lessons and abusing them. There's a
but that's what I'm
there's a
saying.
difference,
Yeah,
and
but parents don't teach their children to be tough by abusing them. You would teach your
yeah.
children, and to be there for them, and put more weight and responsibility on them through each healthy stage of their development. And when they go out into the world and get their asses handed to them, you can then be there and teach them how to have, healthy mental self-defense, healthy
Yeah.
physical self-defense. You don't make people, that is like, see, that's what I'm saying. That is bull. That is the loser adult child parent, because they get off on abusing the kid, and then they just say, oh, it's good for you, because
That's
no,
insane.
it feels good for the
Insane.
parent.
No, they're
because the
just
parent
unhealthy
gets off on
sadists.
it.
Those
Yeah.
aren't
They're
healthy
just
people, and nobody should listen to
and
them ever.
It's just,
and
It's a
I mean,
similar concept to like cold therapy, and I was, learning a little about like Wim Hof, and how exposing yourself to cold increases stress. And yet this actually helps fortify the system within, a reasonable dose, right?
yeah.
And it had me contemplating this similar concept you were describing, Catherine, around like, okay, then we can't avoid stress, right? And it's important for us to, in order to grow, we have to face that edge, right? That edge of resistance, that edge of stress. And the environment in which we do that matters, right? And the idea of not being put in terror of your life, right? You know, of being your own safety being disregarded and forced upon you,
Yeah.
as opposed to coaching and supporting and encouraging, you know, kids to these different kinds
And
of
I would say,
behavior.
like what you're talking about, Leslie, for people who can't seem to separate it in their heads, because I know people can't, separate
Some people seriously
trauma,
can't.
positive trauma, and negative trauma. There is a difference between negative trauma, which is like what we're talking about now. One of the things is abusing children. That is negative trauma. But then
Gonna
positive
hurt me
trauma
and
that
stick.
builds up that resistance, like cold therapy stuff or, health treatments like that, or
Has a
like the
good
kind of,
benefit after it.
yeah, like if you were a kid who was bullied, not that that's okay for a kid, you let your kid be a bully, but like one of the examples for, I would consider it a positive trauma is I was like a kid who was bullied because of my medical condition. So because of that now, like all that did was build a resistance for me of the world and all the dumb animals out there who think that they can behave like that and turn me into this. So
I would beat someone up for you, Sarah.
I know. And a child's resilience is going to depend on other factors in their life, right? If they
so
have a sense of, you know, importance and value in themselves and, you know, an adult or someone in their life who they know has their back, you know, that child is going
Yeah.
to be able to turn a difficult situation into a strength building experience. But it's
absolutely.
also, you know, there's a lot of kids in this world that just don't ever get any positive input at
They
all.
get nothing from
And,
their
and
stewards,
and
and like
it's just a big pit of like, you know, like a dog pile of negative messages and experiences adding up without any sense of foundation of
yeah.
self.
And
Resolve or
I only
ability to
I
deal
only
with
was
it.
go on, Brittany, sorry.
Oh, I was just agreeing,
Yeah.
like just being left hanging with trauma without being able to resolve it, without having a way to like a plan on how to handle anything. They're just left screwed. And
Or
yeah.
somebody to like help guide you like a proper steward. Like I was only a little bit lucky in the sense for my own case is that most of the adults in my world would have been like, okay, we'll just go hide and, stay out of the way, stay out of that trajectory there. But I had one or two adults in my life as a child who were like, okay, well, how do you, let's talk about how we handle this situation properly so that you understand what the other side of this, and you just don't turn into somebody who's going to create that victim within yourself and grow up into an adult to be a victim. And like what you guys, all of you have said, but Catherine, you were saying they're adult children, they're all failure to launch because they didn't have in them, and I think this is purposefully done to us by the Parasite class. They didn't have people who taught them how to handle those kind of, life things. They don't have that. They just don't have the skills because they removed that. And it's certainly a big problem. And that's why we have such a we have a whole generation of people. Really, I think it's technically my generation. I don't even keep up with that stuff, but where they're just like the majority of them are failure to launch. And I don't think it's because they're evil. I think it's because they were thrown into a world where they think disorder like this, dysfunctional behavior, that where atheism is normal, where that's just like there's no God and there's no spiritual, anything, it's just nothing. You're just worm food. My whole generation's like that. They all think this way. So they're all very dysfunctional. And of course, they can't raise children to create a functional sense, even though, our fractions of spirit, I think, will kind of throw in a, there's going to be exceptions to that, I think, and I've seen that myself.
Can I,
But
sorry,
yeah,
like just before we end, and it's kind of in response to what you said before, like that having that a condition kind of helped you to build yourself up or something. Like what I feel like I see in the world, and I don't know what else to call it except a psychological immune system. Like I feel like my body, because it just had no choice very early to get really triggered and activated and set aflame, just mentally because of the like diseased people around me. And I never really, I mean, I had no one looking out for you, so you had to do it all yourself. And so I don't really trust kind of any authority. I sort of always vet everyone. And then,
and you
I'll
should.
and
Yeah,
I'll go on,
everybody should do that,
yeah,
Catherine.
and I'll go on like X or something. And, again, it's been since this like really just makes me crazy. Sorry. When I go on, since COVID and people like they want to blame Fauci, uh, Moderna and Pfizer when, they kind of, took this jab and then maybe got injured or they got some, and then they get to be a victim when they were an adult. And it's like, and then I'm like, I got a better psychological immune system. Like people don't have a psychological immune system, and that's how their physical immune system is able to get completely dismantled. And there was a post on X the other day. There's a somebody, their channel, it's called like Died Suddenly, and they're always posting stuff about people who died of meningitis and all this horrible stuff after getting how many freaking vaccines and stuff. And and I mean, oh, he's like this really nice looking, clean cut firefighter guy, when he's standing there with his wife and everything. And I'm just like, but this guy's got no psychological immune system. That's what he died of.
Yeah, I agree.
I like
agree.
that. I like that framing,
Yeah, psychological immune system.
Yeah.
I think that is a great way.
Yeah.
That is an awesome way to put that. And like we do just have a few more minutes, so I want to get some last thoughts from Catherine and Leslie, and I want Catherine to tell us about her work and about where you can find her, and we'll post them in the description. So go and check it out, and we'll go from there.
I mean, every Wednesday, I think it's been about a year. I've been on revolution.radio Studio B. It's every Wednesday, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. Again, it's just called the Family Industrial Complex, which gets replayed on One Great Work Network the following day, Thursday, every Thursday, 7 to 10 p.m. Sorry, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And I just have a profile on onegreatworknetwork.com. And, I just keep everything simple and basic. Simple and basic will just blow everybody out of the water, because the psychos that be, they confuse things and overcomplicate it just so they can mind screw you. And so by keeping things as simple and basic as possible, that's how, you can really, have really good psychological immune system.
Yeah, and that's what the Girls Club, one of our goals is like, we're not churching it up. It's going to be real. It's going to be there. We ain't like trying to use like very like large $10 words to make it like sound really fancy or intellectual. This is like how real life is. So, that's one of the goals of the Girls Club. Like we're going to be very clear and
down to earth,
down to earth, and we're not going to hold it back, because I think it's important that women really, because we have that, we're part of that, process. And I think women need to start stepping up to the plate that they're supposed to be standing on, right next to the men who are supposed to be standing on their plate, not behind, not in front, but right next to it. And our children are in the middle of that. And we need to be on top of this all the time. The the law, like I just was rereading some of my favorite stuff from Ernest Holmes, and he says repeatedly in his work, the law needs to be, and not man's law, we're talking about genuine law, natural law, spirit's law, God's law, whatever people want to call it. It needs to be reestablished with every single new generation forever.
Can't say better than that.
There ain't no stopping that, forever and ever and ever. Because when we stop reestablishing
fitness, it's just basic fitness.
That's it. It's fitness. It's in your mind. It's in your heart. It's in your body. Fitness. Absolutely.
How we take care of this gift of life that we have, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And why wouldn't we? Why are we straying away from that? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Money is not worth it. That's for sure.
It's not. And I really want to take a moment here at the end to honor you, Catherine, for your work, for your persistence and your passion, the level of care that you have, and really, really putting yourself out there every week is, I'm sure, quite taxing, you know, to step in and continually try to hit your head against this wall, you know. And so I want to commend you for your determination there.
Thank you.
And really encourage all our listeners to really be open and orient to the reality that we're in, and not to be afraid to hear the truth. So hopefully people will check in and listen to your podcast and really see what's really going on. So thank you for joining us.
Go and check out Catherine Waters, because she's got her finger on the pulse here, and she's not holding back. And that's what the Girls Club is all about. So I want to thank Catherine and Leslie and Brittany and everybody who comes and joins us and listens to us every month. We love you. And that's 1 year of the Girls Club. And starting next month is starting our 2nd year. So keep it going, share and subscribe, and go share and subscribe Catherine's work and Leslie's work. And we'll see you next time on the Girls Club.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.